Although if you think about Rogue and the pain she carries, and the fact that she was kicked out of her home by her dad when she was a teenager, and she really hated herself, and she got lured by, Mystique to put somebody into a coma to almost kill someone, Ms. Marvel, and the guilt that she carries about that, and some of the other stuff that she did when she was with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. I mean, as an actor, when you think about the fact that I've suffered a number of these different traumas, it really makes sense that I can then embody that character and express her in a way that goes deep underneath the surface, and you can hear that stuff in my voice.
All right, joining me now is a talented actor and now author. We superhero fans know her as the voice of Rogue in X-Men, the animated series, and of course, X-Men 97. The new book is A Rogue's Tale, a memoir. Time to welcome in Lenore Zann. Lenore, welcome to Comic Book Central.
Well, thank you so much, Sugar. It's great to be here.
Always love when voice actors are right there with like it's so, sometimes you talk to actors and it's like, well, I'll do the voice if you pay me, but sometimes they're right there. The late great Kevin Conroy, he was right there with the Batman. I love that you guys are right there. Cal
Oh,
was always there with the Wolverine
for
every time.
sure, for sure. Well, it also helps when your voice is pretty much the same as the character. It's like people say, well, how did you come up with the voice for Rogue? And I'm like, well, it's just my voice, but with a bit of a Southern accent thrown in, I
Right.
actually,
I think you've even said, wasn't like the voice you got right before Rogue, wasn't it sort of like you got to tap in a little bit of the
yeah,
Southern draw a little
yeah.
bit?
Because X-Men was only my second animated series. And the
Wow.
first one I did was called Stunt Dogs, Dawgs. And I played a Southern character called Sizzle in that. So that gave me
Okay.
a chance to practice my Southern accent and be
I'm
all
not as
prepared.
familiar with stunt dogs. Was that
It
did you
wasn't
even
well
see it or
known.
was this just did you
No,
ever
it was
see stunt
like a
dogs?
stunt man had written it or come up with the idea or something. We did about
Okay.
32 episodes,
Oh
36
wow.
episodes, something like that.
That's
So, but it was before I did X-Men, so it would have been, yeah, like probably 1991, 1990.
okay. Well, in the world of animation, that's a pretty good deal. I mean, that's you get
Yeah,
30 episodes. That's
yeah,
not bad. So,
yeah.
look, I recently had a chance to talk with George Buza and Larry Houston. We were at Cleveland at Fan Expo, so I got a chance to chat with them. So this is perfect timing. We are going to talk about superheroes. We're going to talk about Rogue. We're going to talk about all that. I want to talk about the book though first. You got the new book is out,
Yes.
A Rogue's Tale. So I got to ask, what look, going back and revisiting, first of all, I don't even remember half. I don't even know how you remember stuff. Like, if I had to go back and rewrite
Yeah,
it, were
right.
you jotting things down? Did you keep a journal? Like, what made you decide to do this, which is a huge undertaking?
Mm.
And then how did you do it? What were the mechanics of going back?
Right. Well, actually, I did keep a journal for many, many years. Um, And I just wrote every day pretty well about what was going on in my life and all my adventures going around the world. But when it came time to decide to actually write my memoir, I went on memory. I went on memory alone. I didn't really, as it turned out, I didn't need to look things up. It just sort of wrote itself. I started from the beginning, from my life as a child in Australia, loving the world of Disney and thinking, oh, I would love to be there and magic and all of that kind of stuff. And going back and forth between my grandmother's house out in the outback in the bush in Australia and learning about
Oh, wow.
nature and all the little animals. And then going to the city of Sydney, Australia, where my mom and dad were building a house and taking ballet and wondering what it would be like to be on stage and get dressed up in all those costumes and have an audience, watching your every move kind of thing. So, it just sort of wrote itself. And then I went from there. And every time I got on a plane, I decided to write. And I found that writing on planes is very conducive to writing because you have no excuses. You can't just keep getting up and going into the kitchen and making something or finding a
Right.
to-do project that takes you away from it. So I I went to Australia towards the end of the writing period. It took me about 2 years to write, 18 months. And I went back to Australia to see my family. And that's a 16-hour flight from LA to Sydney. And I wrote 4 chapters. I didn't sleep. I wrote.
Wow.
I wrote 4 chapters on the way there, and I wrote 4 chapters on the way back. So eight
Wow.
chapters. Yeah.
Man, that's unbelievable. What were the challenges that you faced? Like just trying to go back, because I know there are some very fun parts of the book. There are some very dark parts of the book. I know I would flip a page and go, "Whoa, did not see that coming."
Mhm.
And you get into a lot of different issues as far as mental health. You talk about alcoholism. You talk about like a lot of different things. You talk about sexual assault in the book too. What were the challenges for you just going back? And sort of recounting those things. And did you like have to interview like family members? Did you talk to people during this whole process? And how cathartic was that?
Well, it was very cathartic. I'd been sober when I started writing it. I had been sober about 26 years. So, my sobriety is well and truly honed. I mean, as we say, it's just one day at a time. Any day you could go back if you weren't careful.
You mentioned that specifically in the book. Yeah.
Right. And so I felt fine about going back and revisiting that. But the sexual assault stuff was difficult. And it really did bring back a lot of memories. But then as I started to think back about it, I realized what led up to my really going into my alcoholism in a bad way, which was during the 90s when Croatia and the former Yugoslavia, the Baltic Wars, and we started reading all these horrendous stories about women being raped and rape camps and all these terrible things that were going on and the abuse. And that suddenly I realized that was when it triggered me as a person back in the 90s, because it had happened when I was there in 1986 back in Croatia. And that was when my drinking really took off too, like in a big way. So I felt like I was really trying to numb the pain and to forget. So I learned a lot about myself that way. And having finally written it down and talked about it in public, it was time. And that's why whenever I read about women coming forward and telling their story and people not believing them or whatever, I really feel for them because I know how hard it is. You
Yeah.
don't want to make this stuff up.
Well, and you even mentioned the book too, as you're going through that, you not only recount that, and you've mentioned that this is, I think, the first time, in the book that you've sort of come out with that, but you also give practical advice to people that are going through this, or maybe some helpful counsel, things that you've learned from it.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's just such there's so much in this book to cover, and there's so much beneficial for any of these things that individuals are going through. I think it was interesting too because you mentioned, was it Leon? I think you had mentioned at the time,
yeah,
was it when you first met him at AA? It was like he was at
yes,
30 years. And you're
yes.
like, oh, I can never get to that point. And then if I'm
Right.
doing the math right, I think next year is 30 years. So congratulations.
Almost. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Absolutely
Yeah.
right.
As I
Yeah,
was reading that, I'm going,
yeah,
wow, I mean, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's it's much more than Rogue. Let's
It,
put it
it
that
is.
way. We love Rogue, we love superheroes, but
It's
it
true.
is such an incredible
Although
account.
if you think about Rogue and the pain she carries, and the fact that she was kicked out of her home by her dad when she was a teenager, and she really hated herself, and she got lured by, Mystique to put somebody into a coma to almost kill someone, Ms. Marvel, and the guilt that she carries about that, and some of the other stuff that she did when she was with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. I mean, as an actor, when you think about the fact that I've suffered a number of these different traumas, it really makes sense that I can then embody that character and express her in a way that goes deep underneath the surface, and you can hear that stuff in my
Yeah.
voice.
There's so much about X-Men, the animated series, and X-Men 97 that goes so far beyond Saturday morning TV, things we grew up on, but that they tap into so much. I think you even talk about this in the book too, about now getting to meet the fans all these years later and hearing
Yeah.
their experiences what that show meant to them, things that helped them get through things in life. You talk
Yeah.
about that. Can you give some of those examples? I think even you mentioned like soldiers overseas at one point, just
Yeah.
being able to tap into that show, and that was a release for them too.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that I used to get a lot of fan mail, like snail mail, fan
Hmm.
mail. Um,
Letters,
yeah,
stamps,
letters.
and
They would send them to my agency, and then my agency would send them on to me. And I got a lot of mail from, yeah, from guys that were overseas that were stationed on like on a ship in the Gulf War, and also some folks that were in jail. And they were like, you are my solace. Like your show is my safe place. I feel
wow,
good when I'm watching your show. I love Rogue. She just, she'll put herself on the line for her friends and for others, for strangers, because she wants to do the right thing. And so that was very touching and very moving. And now, we're getting 3 or 4 generations of families coming
hmm,
to us at Comic-Con.
yeah.
So I see little fans who are 5 and 6 years old who are like, it's my favorite show I've ever seen. And one little
With all
girl,
these dark themes coming in and
I
everything,
know.
right?
I'm like, wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's one little 6-year-old girl. She said, "Oh, yes, I love Rogue and I love your show. And I've watched it now. I've seen it 6 times." I went, "Oh my goodness, when did you start? When you were in the womb?" You know?
right, right.
And and she goes, "Yes, and I've even watched episode 5. I watched it 6 times." And I said, "Wow, that was a pretty heavy,
And for right, for people
right?"
that haven't seen it, tell episode 5 at least what the theme it deals with.
Yeah, it deals with death. It deals
Yes,
with
there's a
facing
key
death.
character that, yeah.
Right.
And she's
But
watched that like 5 or 6.
yeah. And I said
Yeah.
to her father, who was with her, I said, "Well, did you guys talk about it?" He said, "Oh, yes. We
Yeah.
discussed it right after the first time." And he said, "And we discussed the fact that death is a part of life and this is something that happens." And
Wow.
he said, "We had a very good discussion about it." And then she wanted to watch it again and again and again and again. And I said,
Right.
"Oh my goodness, so you didn't find it scary?" And she said, "No, it was exciting." And I said, and did it make you sad? Did you cry?" She said, "Oh, yes. I cried." She said, "And I feel so sorry for Rogue because she lost both of her boyfriends."
That's a kid that has a handle on some things in life right there. Well, yeah, that's the
Right.
great thing about comic books and comic book tales and superheroes and animation, things like that, is that you can maybe tap into some of these things. I
Yeah,
know Star Trek did that back in the day. They tapped in all kinds of things, but the way it's
sure.
presented is in an exciting manner.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, the key, we'll talk about this too. I think Larry Houston, one of the show's creators, was talking about that, how they didn't want to do like typical Saturday morning, like you have to have a dog and the thing, and like a Scooby
Right.
Doo and a Zoinks and a Gleek and that. They
Yeah.
wanted to do something that didn't pander to kids, that didn't talk down to kids.
Right.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's always the best thing. When you think about like old Looney Tunes and stuff, there were so many jokes in there that went over our heads as a kid. But then I
Yeah.
got years later, I caught them. I'm like, oh, I get it now.
Right.
But I think that's the brilliance of this show. We'll talk
Mm-hmm.
about that. We'll get into some of the specifics on it, but yeah, it's a multi-layered show. In the book, you definitely talk about a very interesting time, that the early to mid '80s. Definitely a cautionary tale, as as we've talked about too. But I want to talk about a couple of things right there. Some near misses. So, like, you almost got the Diane Chambers part in Cheers. Was it pretty? Was it
Yeah.
down to you and Shelley Long?
Yeah. Yeah. We were in the
Wow,
chairs. We were in the dressing room at NBC Studios in New York. She was in one chair and I was in the other, and getting our makeup done and everything for the screen tests.
wow,
And she got that one, and I was only, I mean, I was 22 at the time. She was older than me. She was probably like 26, maybe 25 or 6. Um,
yeah.
and
There's
she,
a comedy resume coming in, I think, that she had
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so, and I had gotten that opportunity because I had been brought into audition and got Love Sydney with Tony, oh gosh,
Tony Randall.
Tony Randall.
Yeah.
And then that fell through at the last minute, at the 11th hour, which was so disappointing because that was going
Yeah.
to be, it was like a drama with comedy, a dramedy. and I was going to be working with him and playing a young actress that moves to New York, and she wants to she gets pregnant and she wants to have an abortion, and he says, "No, no, no. Let's, have the baby. I'll help you bring it up, and I'll help look after you. I've always wanted to have a child." And he's an older gay man, but the moral majority at the
I was
time.
gonna say, you talk about this boy, Jerry Falwell gets involved,
Yes.
and there's this. It was back in
Yeah,
the day when you would write
right.
letters and
Yeah.
yell at a
Jerry
network, and yeah,
Falwell and the moral
they
majority.
changed the whole thing around.
They contacted the NBC. They talked to Grant Tinker, who was the president, who was
Yeah,
Mary Tyler Moore.
right.
And they said, if you go ahead with the show the way it's written, we will boycott it, and we'll get all your advertisers to boycott it too. And he called my agent and said, and he was in tears. And he said, "This was my baby. I felt this was the time to do this show. It has never been done before. It would be the first of
Yeah,
its kind." And he said, "But we can't do it. They won't let us do it. So I have to rewrite. We have to rewrite." And unfortunately, my character had to be gotten rid.
right. They switched it to Swoosie Kurtz, and
Yeah,
I
they
think
made
there was
him,
a
yeah,
kid, like
yeah,
a I don't
an
know, 6,
older.
7 year older kid in it. Yeah,
Yes.
right. It's amazing some of these near misses. Like some of those make unbelievable stories, though. Like even if you didn't get it at the time, they make great stories for a
Yeah,
memoir. I
amazing, right?
gotta I gotta ask you about one. I'm a huge. If I flip this camera around right now,
Mhm.
everything you'd see would be Indiana Jones on the other
All
wall.
right. All
So
right.
I've got to ask you about Indiana Jones
Yeah.
and the Temple of Doom, or I'm
Mhm.
guessing as when you were reading for it, it was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Death,
Uh,
pre-name change because they didn't change the name until they started filming it.
they didn't.
Um,
I didn't actually ever read for it. He just wanted to meet with me and talk with me.
okay,
So I went for
because
that
you
meeting.
were Marilyn Monroe, like
Yeah.
you portrayed Marilyn Monroe. I think you were 19 years old.
Yeah.
It was like a rock opera. And so
Correct.
you had this sort of look that we know from the movie now. We see Willie Scott at the beginning. She comes out in the red dress and she's got the
Yes.
whole, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So he was like, oh, I want to see people like that.
Right.
Can you tell us anything about your meeting with Steven Spielberg? Did you talk about Indiana Jones? Were you an Indiana Jones fan? Anything you can give us that puts us in that room at that time?
Um, no, we didn't talk about Indiana Jones, but it was
Okay.
interesting because when I got to the studio and I was going up the stairs, I looked up and there was Mel Gibson coming down. And I loved Mel Gibson. I mean, I was born in Australia. He's Australian. I'd seen Mad Max.
Right.
I was so shy, I barely knew what to say to him, but but he was really short. I know he was on the stairs and stuff, but he was short. And then I came up into into the office outer room, and then Sylvester Stallone was coming out of his office, and he was short too.
Why
And
were they there? I read this part of the book. I'm like, why were they there?
they were probably talking about projects,
All right.
obviously.
I
It
guess I'm
showed
trying to
me.
think, rack my brain as to like what they would have been there for, but
Well,
yeah,
it
okay.
showed me how that works. Like a lot of stars were wanting to work with Spielberg, and they
Yeah.
probably had projects and ideas that they wanted to do,
All
right?
right.
And so,
It's a great story.
there were a whole bunch of them. I was like, man, it's like
Yeah.
Grand Central Station for short movie stars, I was like,
Short, muscular movie stars or so. Yeah.
yeah.
Had you seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? Did
Yes.
you know this was a prequel? Did you know they were
No,
going
I
back
didn't
in
know. I didn't
time?
I didn't really even know exactly what it was at the beginning, what he was
Okay.
looking for me for.
Right.
But he kind of explained it a little bit, but he wanted to look at he'd seen my reel. I had a reel of a film that I'd shot called The Black Mirror, where I played a woman in prison who was in prison for, I think, prostitution. Yeah, but she was forced to commit a murder in the prison, and she becomes this protagonist by the end, and she's going to be in there for life. Pretty heavy duty role for a young woman. I was only 20 by this time. And so he had seen that and he wanted to meet me. And I showed him pictures from the Marilyn Monroe rock opera and stuff. And we just
Yeah.
talked. We got along really, really well. He was so
Right.
super easy to talk to. And
Yeah.
and I probably was in there about 40 minutes to an hour. Uh,
Okay.
and then I found out that he didn't think I was right for that part, but he put me on to these other casting directors who were, I guess, helping him cast. And that's how the Tony Randall Loves Sydney
The
thing
Love Sydney
came
thing.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So one led to the other. I'm just curious, like to be in that room at that time. And I guess you're not talking about like Indiana Jones or different things like that. You're probably just talking about life or different
yeah,
experiences or
yeah.
acting and things you had. But for us fans, we just like, did, were there any, did he reveal anything of any scenes? Like we're going to go to this big
No,
dark thing and hearts are going to be ripped out. All right. All
no,
right.
no, he didn't talk about any of
That's a
that.
book I'm writing in my mind. That's
Right,
all.
right. But I watched The Fablemans, uh,
Yeah.
my family with my mom and my dad, before my dad passed, and it really was really sweet.
Yeah.
It was important for me to watch that with dad and say to dad, hey, you really inspired me too to go out there and set the world on fire, and because my dad always said you can do anything you want to do. Anything that you
Yeah.
dream of, don't let anything stop you. And my grandmother told me the same thing. And I talk about that in the book.
Very touching part of the book, and you got some nice closure there too. It
Yeah.
really the tale plays. Did you see Temple of Doom? Did you? I mean,
Oh
did you ever
yeah.
watch it?
Loved
Oh,
it.
you've seen it.
I
Did you
loved
watch it on the screen and go, "Oh, that's dark. That's darker than I thought it was going to be." That ain't Raiders of the Lost
I
Ark.
mean, I just loved it. I love anything
All
he does. I
right.
think he's an amazing. I mean, Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Holy moly. And yeah, yeah, no, he always blows me away. So it would have been amazing to work with him. The other person that he had his casting directors introduce me to at that time, I'm not sure if I put it in the book or not, was Peter Yates, who was
Okay.
he was a director and he was doing another film and he had me meet with him as well, but that one didn't pan out either. So
Okay.
yeah.
You should have told them about all the horror films you did. That might have
Yeah,
cemented
right.
the deal there. Yeah, you
I
did a lot
hadn't
of
done
horror
all the
films at
horror
the time.
films by then. I did the horror films later on.
Oh, they after that. Oh, okay. I got it
Yeah.
mixed up
I
then.
was
Okay.
I
There was
was
like some
I was
slasher stuff.
20. I was like 20 when I met with Spielberg.
Wow.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
like 20. And to be honest, I'd only really done like that one big starring role as Marilyn Monroe in the rock
Marilyn.
opera. And
All
I'd done
right.
a couple of small parts in films at that point, but nothing big.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's right. I had to ask you about that because I'm just
Yeah,
such a huge Indiana
less
Jones fan.
came
People
later.
listening to this love Indiana Jones. All right, let's talk about X-Men the animated series. 1992 comes along. How did you like you weren't like comic book kid. Like you like Disney, but you weren't like flipping through pages of
No,
X-Men, right?
no,
Okay.
I didn't know the X-Men. The only one of our original cast who knew about the X-Men was George Buza.
Yeah, he mentioned that. Like he was like it was Project X, I think they called it.
Yes,
Like they
that's
didn't
what
want to
they
tip their
called
hand.
it.
He's like, "What do you mean Project X? This is X-Men."
Right. And he said, and George talks about how he bought the first X-Men comic when he was a
Hmm.
kid or something, at
Yep.
the age of 6 or something like that,
Yep.
back in the 60s. The rest of us had no idea what it was. I
Yeah.
just knew that
Okay. So
they
you
were
did
characters.
you didn't even want to go to the audition, right? Like
I didn't.
initially?
No, not originally, because I was busy doing movies, television, and theater. You know, um,
Yeah.
I was what I would call a serious actress, and back then, you thought of cartoons like funny, goofy little voices and things like that.
Scooby-Doo, Super Friends. Yep.
Yeah, so I didn't really. I'd done that one show, the one Stunt Dogs, but I
Yeah.
really was focusing more on film and television, and I had just finished doing a play in New York for about 9 months, and I'd done the same play in Chicago the year before that for about 9 months. So I was on a roll with my like
Okay.
leading actor roles. So I didn't really want to go and do an audition for a cartoon series. But then
Right.
my agent called me when they were having callbacks, is when she said, Lenore, they still haven't found the right actress for this role. They're looking for someone with a deep, husky, sexy voice who can do a Southern accent. And she said, it's you. They haven't found it because it's you. So get your ass in gear and get down there to the studio. So
That's a
I
good
did.
manager right there. That's a
Yes,
good
it,
agent.
it worked. I went down. I opened up my mouth. I said the first lines that were there on the page, and I heard Larry Houston go, don't let her leave the building. That's the one. That's Rogue. That's the voice we've been waiting
They
for.
knew. What did that mean to you? Like, because right then you're like, I don't really want to do animation, but then there's this like, oh, you were born to play this. I mean, there's got to
Yeah.
be that part of you as an actress, that is just like, okay, I want to be accepted. I want to be wanted. I think even Larry, in my interview with him, he says now he appreciates being appreciated. And I thought that was a pretty cool thing, a way to say it. They're bringing the OGs back for 97.
That's
It's
true.
almost like, was that it in the moment where you were just like, okay, I got to do this now?
Well, once I started reading the scripts, then I went,
Okay.
oh, now I know why I'm doing this. This is
Okay.
perfect for me because
Yeah.
it is deep. There's a lot of deep stuff, and the background material, like their backstories, their origin stories, are all so interesting. And the producers said later on that they wanted to get actors who could do Shakespeare, actors who had real deep acting chops, who could go to those deep
Okay.
places of emotion and express that with
Wow.
their voices. And that's why they went with all of us who were theater and film and TV performers.
But you all didn't get a sense, like now we know how big the show was.
Hmm.
And now we know how big the show X-Men 97 is. But in the moment when you guys were doing all this, season one, season two, you guys didn't really get all that. I mean, pre-internet, there's no social media. There's no, I think, weren't there stories of like, they didn't even get the fan letters to you guys? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
how isolated were you guys from the success of the show?
completely.
And when did you find out about it?
We only found out about 5 years ago how
5 years
popular
ago from
it
now, I
was.
think.
Yeah, yes, yep,
Wow.
yeah.
That's
It was
unreal.
bizarre. It was like we got someone contacted us to ask us to come and do a 25th year, like 25-year reunion after
Right.
the fact of, and this is before the show had been announced that Disney hadn't even bought Fox yet or
Fox.
anything. And so a bunch of us said sure, and we went down to New Braunfels, Texas, and we did this reunion at a Comic-Con, and we all got along so well. And that's when we first met Larry Houston. We'd never
Mhm.
met him because he was in LA when we were in Toronto. And we met Julia and Eric Lewald, the writers. We'd never met them before. And all of us just got along so well. And we went out for dinner the very final night. And we said, oh, wouldn't it be nice if somebody was to buy the rights to our show and reboot it and bring all of us back? And we were like, oh, yeah, that would be awesome. And we had a toast, we had a drink. I think we were drinking margaritas. Mine was virgin.
Yeah.
And we
Right,
went,
right,
here we go. Let's put that out there to the universe. Okay,
right.
universe, there you go. That's what we want. And then bang, a couple of years later, we heard that the rights had been bought by Disney. And then in 2021, we were all approached to come back.
Yeah.
And here we are now. But it was only when we went to the Comic Cons, when we
Yeah.
started going to those, that's when we realized how popular the show had been.
Saw the reaction. You start hearing the stories, you get the
Yeah.
feedback. Yeah. When you were recording initially for the show,
Mhm.
did they give you comic books? Did you look through anything? Was
So
there anything you could take from it, or just everything was on the page that you needed?
everything was on the page. And let's remember, there was no Wikipedia. There was
Right.
no
Right.
nothing you could just Google. Go, oh, okay, who is Rogue? What's her story? That
Yeah.
didn't exist. So
Right.
no.
I didn't know if they just like sent you a whole box of comic books or something and said like, "Here's some cool stuff." Okay, I
Yeah,
didn't know if they
no,
did
they
anything.
didn't. No.
Well, let's get it. You said in 2017, I wish someone would talk to those LA people into doing another series of the 90s version. I don't think my voice has changed much. It hasn't.
Right.
You got that perfect with that smoky kind of, the Southern drawl.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that too, of like this whole time period goes by. You
Hmm.
sort of reference it, but when I talked to Larry, he said this never happens in Hollywood. They never go back and get the OG. They might reboot something, but they're getting other voice actors in. They're getting big A-listers or something, you like
Yeah.
Tom Hanks will do. Like I always talk to actors and they're like, why is Tom Hanks doing these things?
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
Frank Welker in there or somebody.
Right.
Um, what was that like for you when you got that call and they said, we're getting the band back together?
It was a lifeline. It was a lifeline because, and I talk about it in the book about how I had just come through a terrible, terrible personal time of loss, where we'd had the pandemic. We just had a terrible mass shooting happen in my community. I had left acting for 12 years to be in politics. And so I was elected 4 times. I was in my fourth term working with Prime Minister Trudeau. I was a member of parliament. But then we had this terrible mass shooting happen. And suddenly there was an election and I lost my seat. And so after 12 years of working like nonstop around the clock for my constituents and to try and make life better, I felt like I was free falling. I didn't know what to do. I was like, well, how can I possibly go back to acting? I mean, where would I even start? I'd given up all my apartments and homes and stuff, except for in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I didn't have any agents anymore. I mean, I didn't have my finger,
12 years is a long time.
right? It's a very long time, especially when you're a woman. And I just went, I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I felt like I was
Wow.
free falling and there was nothing to really hang on to. Plus, my niece, my sweet little 17-year-old niece, Maya, had just died of cancer. It was horrendous. And so I was deeply, deeply mourning and depressed and just grieving. And then suddenly I got this message that Disney was looking for me for some project or other. And I was
That little Australian girl
like,
in the outback
yeah,
just thought Disney.
right?
Or Disney, because
And
that's a whole different
Disney.
ballgame now.
I'm like, but at first I didn't believe it. I thought it was
Of course.
I was, I was like, I wrote back. The gentleman, his name is Mike Perez, who had brought us all to New Braunfels for that first 25-year reunion. And so it was
Right.
him that reached out. He said, Lenore, I have someone who got a hold of me and they're looking for you. And well, Disney's might be interested in you for something. And I was like, yeah, right. Well, I said,
Hmm.
if it's real, give them my phone number and get them to call me.
Right.
And then I got this call, and it was from Meredith Lane, who is the casting director and voice director for X-Men. And she
Right.
said, I'm working with Disney, and they are very keen to have you do an audition for a new show. She wouldn't say what it was. And she said, so we're going to send you the script,
Project X
right?
2.0.
Basically, that's what it was, Project X 2.0. And she said,
Wow.
so if you could, record it and then send it back by email, that would be great. And luckily, I knew how to do that, although that had all happened during the
Right.
12 years that I wasn't an actor,
Right.
learning how to
Right.
go into a room and record on your phone, turn it into an MP3 and email it to LA, like, but I did it. And as soon as I saw the lines, I went, "Oh, I know what this is. These are lines from X-Men."
Okay, what tipped you off? Because you
They were
probably had
lines I'd already done.
they done they
They
just
were
took
lines
lines
I
from
had
the old
recorded
scripts.
years ago. They're just the same lines.
All right.
Yeah.
Did
So
you
I
just
went,
hit it cold with Rogue? You just went right into Rogue right
I
off the
just went,
bat.
"Oh, they're looking for Rogue. Okay, I'll do Rogue." So I just did Rogue on
But
my
you knew
phone.
you put that out in the ether. I
Yeah,
mean, when
yeah,
it's like, okay, it's here now.
right.
What did that mean to you at that time?
Oh my God, it was amazing because it was interesting because when I found out, she called back and said, "Okay, Lenore, they loved it. Now they want to meet with you. So we're going to
Yeah.
do a Zoom meeting with the producers in Hollywood." And I'm in
Pressure.
Truro, Nova Scotia, this tiny little town of 13,000 people, right? And I went, okay. And then just as I was talking with her, I looked out my window and this red cardinal landed on this little outdoor table and we have a thing out in Nova Scotia and maybe other parts of the world that if you see a red cardinal, it means like somebody that died that you loved is near and that they're sending
Okay.
you a message. And I said, oh, there's a little red cardinal. Thank you, Maya. So I said, like, it was my little niece sending me a message that everything was going to be okay.
That took the pressure off of
Yeah,
like I got to reland the role, but I mean, so that
yeah,
just took all the pressure off, and you're just like,
yeah. It
I
was
got
like
this.
kind of like in the book how I talk about when I see the stag the night before my dad passed away.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that. And
There's a
having,
part where you're driving along and you pull
yeah,
off to the road and you see right in front of you. Yeah.
yeah, a stag in the middle of the road, just standing there as if he was
Right.
waiting for me, as if he had a message for me. And then when I looked up the what does a stag stand for, and it stands for, strong masculinity, but it's not overt, it's not toxic masculinity, it's masculinity that's comfortable in its own skin and is there to protect the herd or whatever, and is just standing there in their own right. And I went, "Oh my God, that's my dad. That's my dad." You
You
know.
get this connection to nature, man, that comes out. Is that like maybe an offspring of all the stuff you did in Canadian Parliament? You were like doing a lot for the environment. Maybe this
Yeah.
is like
Well, I
karma
think
coming back to
I
you.
think the stuff I did for the environment in Canada in Parliament is because of my connection to nature.
All right.
And that
Okay.
connection to nature started with my
There's the full
grandmother
circle.
when I was a kid back in the outback in the bush.
Oh, okay.
When I was a kid, and she used to teach me about the nature and Mother Nature, and to be grateful
Okay.
for Mother Nature and all the animals and all the creatures. And that makes me very interested and very connected to the indigenous peoples of the world. Because I had my little friends back in Australia when I was little. They were indigenous kids, and Mrs. Ping was my grandmother's best friend, and she used to tell us stories about the bush and the lore. And then when I moved to Canada, I was very interested in indigenous issues, and many of my friends are indigenous, the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia, and they've taught me a lot. So we
Hmm.
have a lot in common, and I felt like if I'm going to be in government, it's my job to try and protect and preserve the environment for many generations to come.
Yeah, you did that for over a decade. That's amazing. Well, we're looking
Yeah.
forward to that in part two of the book. I think your second book, you're talking
Yes,
about that.
yes.
What's X-Men 90s, X-Men 97 now? What's the same? What's different? And what do you appreciate about both? I mean, it's such a huge gap in between,
Mhm.
but what's familiar to you and what's completely different?
Well, my connection to Rogue is the same.
Mm,
And so whenever I go into the studio, I just love getting back into my character and expressing whatever it is that she's going through. And having lived more years now, I've had a lot more experiences I can draw from and use, including the grief over losing my sweet niece at an early age when I went in to record episode 5. I remember it. And so I have that, but also it's so nice now to be able to connect with the fans real time, while the show is
mhm.
airing, hearing what they're saying, seeing what they're writing on social media, talking back and forth to them, also meeting them at the Comic Cons and seeing each other at Comic Con. Comic Cons is a
Yeah.
great way to both promote the show and see each other. And we just have a whale of a time. I just love the cast. I love the new cast. They're adorable. I love them. And I love my original cast. And so it's a really nice mixture. And
Does the new cast kind of, I asked George
yeah.
about this and Larry about this, like, does the new cast, do they kind of look to you, the OGs as like, moms and dads and kind of bring it, because they grew up on this show, right? Some of these folks grew up on this show.
I mean, it's interesting because a couple of them, Holly in particular, Holly Chow and also AJ, said that they always used to love to dress up like the X-Men when they were kids. Like she loved to dress up as Storm, and he always wanted to play Gambit, which is interesting
Wow.
because he got to play it.
Wow.
But I think they look at us as like older brothers and sisters. I don't think they look at us as mom and pops. We're not those.
Okay, that's fair. No,
Like, I
that's
don't
fair.
have kids, and Callan doesn't have any kids. And George
Yeah.
has a house full of them and grandkids, but I think it's more like they look up to us as being like their heroes. And
Yeah.
and I made it very clear that I wanted to be embracing of them and welcome them into the fold so that they know
Yeah.
that they're part of our family.
Well, that's how we look at you too. So when do you watch the episodes? So we got season ones out there. That's
Mhm.
sitting out
Yeah.
there on Disney Plus. Do you watch them? How does that work? Or do you, can I don't want to watch them, or because
Well,
it's such a time period from when you record it to when here it
yeah.
is.
Well, what we did with season 1 was we had watch parties. So there
Okay.
were public watch parties that some friends of mine and I started. with a place called Scum and Villainy, which is, you know,
Perfect.
right? It's a bar in West Hollywood. And so, and they have TVs in every room. And so we'd have these watch parties and we would invite fans to come and watch the show with us
Oh,
as it aired.
wow. How do
Yeah,
I get that invite? How do I score
right?
one of those?
It's,
Wow.
anyone can come. It's
All
not, you don't
right.
have to be invited. You just have to be in LA when we're doing it and come on down to Scum and Villainy and we would do a Q&A like afterwards. So
Wow.
yeah, we did that every week. It
So
was
that's when you're watching them for the first time. Are they,
yeah,
I don't know if they were sending you screeners or like you see
no,
that.
no.
So when you see this and when you see like episode 5 and then
Yeah.
you see like episode 7, I think those are two of your big ones too.
Yes.
When you see that, what's going on in your mind?
Well, let me put it this way. For episode 5, that was the only one I didn't want to do with the public and do a public watch.
Okay,
They
that's
held the public watch and they all went to the bar and they watched it there, but I didn't want to be there for that one because it was such an emotional one. I wanted to just
yeah,
be with our team, with our
right.
cast. So we had a private showing of it at a friend's house.
Okay.
That one. And so we had lots of tissues there and we were all, everybody cried. We were all crying.
Did you anticipate, you knew you recorded it, you know what you went through when you recorded it, you read, I think you read the whole scripts. I think you say
Yeah.
you like to see what happens with everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when it plays out in
Hmm.
real time and you see that moment where she loses him,
Yeah. Oh
um,
my God. I mean, it just,
were you ready for it at all?
well, I knew it was coming.
Right, but
I knew.
when you see the animation and you hear the music and the whole thing,
And the silence,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and
right, right,
it just goes to black and then you just hear. I
yeah,
mean, I wanted to portray what deep grief really feels like and what it sounds like.
yeah,
And it did the trick.
yeah,
You know, I mean, I did
you
what
got
I
it.
needed to do with my performance, and then they just enhanced it with by going to black and just hearing my voice and nothing else. That was
Yeah.
brilliant. I'm pretty sure that was Jake Castorina's idea, and it was great.
And then the line, I think, what is I can't.
I Sugar, I can't feel you. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And then it just, yeah. Well, just even you saying that just like weighs
yeah,
heavy. Yeah,
yeah,
okay. Okay.
yeah.
You give so much to Rogue, obviously, for over 30 years. What do you take from it? What does Lenore take from Rogue? Are there lessons, life lessons that you get from her, or are there things you take from the character?
Well, I like to say she's in me and I'm in her. We are we are one in a way. There's a lot of her that I'm very like, and I've put a lot of myself inside of her. So, um, yeah, I mean, she expresses me very well. You know, when I played Marilyn Monroe when I was 19, 20, I was able to tap into a lot of stuff there to portray her. But to be honest, being so young, I hadn't experienced a lot of the stuff I've experienced now. I'd probably do an even better job now. Whereas with Rogue, you know, it's like, yeah, I can keep living and keep putting all my experiences into her and into the performance. And we keep growing together.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully, and I want to talk about the future of the show too. But it's comic book central. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about your role in another Marvel project. You get
Mhm.
to play Tigra
Yeah.
in the Avengers United They Stand. I know there was less episodes than X-Men,
Yeah.
but do you recall bringing that character to life or what you did with that? A little bit different. Yeah, a lot
Oh, she
different.
was a lot of fun. Yeah. They pulled from the cast of X-Men a number of us and cast some
Mhm.
new folks as well. And I really had hopes that that show would continue on, but you know, she's strong and she's feisty, just like Rogue. I have another character that I play that's very similar to both of those, which is Aisha Clan in Outlaw Star. And Outlaw Star was on Toonami. So a lot of fans say, "Oh, I remember you in that. I didn't realize it was you, or it's the same as Rogue, but now I get it."
Yeah.
Because she's very similar too. I get to play these really strong, feisty, kick-ass women, and I love it.
Yeah, and that's how good you are because we can't tell from role to role, but we know that you're in there
Thank
because
you.
they're so strong.
Thank you.
Let's talk. Revival is coming up, another
Yeah.
comic book
Yeah.
project. So Revival is going to premiere on Sci-Fi at 10 p.m. on June 12th,
Yeah.
and then shortly after on Peacock. This is from the Image Comics series from 2012 to 2017. Did they send you comic
Yeah.
books, and did you flip through them and read the whole story to find out how it ends? Did you
They
do
gave
that?
us, I've got a compendium.
Okay,
I've got the
you got the
compendium.
trade
It just came
paperback,
out.
the whole thing.
Yeah, like it just came out. It's about this thick. It's
Yeah.
really
Okay.
beautiful. And
Did you
it's
flip
got
to the
all
end to see how everything happens?
no, I did not.
Okay, just checking.
I read certain parts of it and I'm keeping other parts for later. But
Very good.
and my character's in there, Jeannie Gorski. And
Yes.
so I'm a recurring role in the show. And we shot it in New Brunswick. It's an American-Canadian co-production. We shot it
Okay.
in New Brunswick. And I think it's going to be a big hit. It's going to be on Sci-Fi
Yeah.
slash Peacock. But I'm telling you, the stuff that I've seen a few of the sizzle reels, and the trailer looks amazing.
Yeah.
So, and it was,
Very mysterious.
yeah,
And it's like zombies, but they're not really zombies because
right.
they're like these people it takes place what in this one day of like people come
Yeah,
back,
in a
they
little
die and then
town
they come
in
back.
Wisconsin. And
And then
yeah,
there's this mystery is like how they came back or something.
yes.
And what's your role? Are you
I play,
investigating? Are
well,
you
I'm a dispatch officer. I'm the dispatch
okay?
officer at the sheriff's station where everything all kind of happened.
So when
So,
crazy things happen, you have to send them off.
yeah, that's
Do
right.
you get your hands dirty? Are you going out and
I'm not going
looking
to
at
tell
weird
you. You
things?
have to watch the
All right,
show
I
and
gotta watch
see.
the
I mean,
thing.
I'm like,
In the
I'm a
middle.
vault when it comes to this kind of stuff. I've had good practice with X-Men.
Oh, I was gonna say you're getting paid by Disney now. You have to be a vault. That is, they lock to everything.
Yep, I'm a vault.
Um,
All I'll say is it's
season.
really good and you're gonna love it.
All
Yeah,
right, we're gonna
it's
set that.
gonna
We're
be a
gonna
lot
put
of
that in the
fun.
queue.
Yeah.
Seasons 2 and 3 of X-Men, they've already been announced. I think you've recorded season
Hmm.
2, right?
Yes, yes. I'm
So
still
that's
going
all
back
being
and doing a little bit of ADR for that, but
okay.
mainly it's all done. And then season three,
And
I've
that's
just
just for people to know that's automatic dialogue replacement. So like if
yes,
they
that's
change a
yeah,
line, you have to go back in and
that's
do
right.
something.
I go
Okay.
back and I do some pickups. I do some changes of lines or whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Nothing on 3 yet?
and yeah, I've done some three. I've started on three.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because season 1 ends and you're like everything's weird. Like your Rogue
Hmm.
is Rogue, right?
Hmm.
Rogue's kind of
And they're
gone
all in
rogue.
different places. They're in
Okay.
different places in different times.
Right. Can you tell us anything about 2 at all? I know you're a vault.
Not really,
How much fun have you had? Let's put it
well,
that way.
other than I'll tell you, it's been really a great ride for Rogue, and
Okay.
her journey continues. I look at her as the hero's journey, the hero's journey where you're going off, you've got a prize that's set in your mind that you want to attain, and she will do anything to get there. And so Rogue continues this intense journey, and I think fans are not going to be disappointed.
Okay, because I know she wants Gambit back. I don't know if I would think maybe, I don't know. Anything can happen in the world of superheroes.
You
I
know,
just love that they're doing so
anything.
much with the character that they didn't do in the movies. I love the
Hmm.
movies, but there's so much, I think it's more faithful to
Right.
what the character is. Do you get a sense of that? That what they're
Yeah,
doing
for
here
sure.
explores what she can do so much more?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think with the movies, they kind of went for an age demographic with Rogue,
Hmm.
and they made her a combination of like a young Rogue and Jubilee.
Right.
And even like the relationship she has in the movies with Wolverine. I mean, that's not quite the way it is in the comics, and that's more
Right.
like Jubilee. That's like
Right.
Jubilee in Wolverine. And Rogue is not one of those I need to be saved kind of gals. She's like, who can I save? Right?
You see that in every ounce of your performance too. It just comes
Thank you.
across, and in how they write. The
Yeah.
writing, the animation, everything is so pitch perfect. The actors are flawless. I am so glad they brought you
Sure.
guys back. As Larry mentioned, this never happens in Hollywood. I'm so glad that it did. We're glad everybody's back. How can fans find out about you? Where are you at? You're on the socials? You're out there?
Yep, I'm on Instagram at Lenore Zann, and I'm on Twitter/X at Zann Lenore. Also on Facebook. You can follow me there, and
Okay.
come to a Comic-Con near you if you see that I'm
You'll
going to.
have, if you're there, it'll be out there. Your
Yes,
schedule,
I
they'll
usually
show
put
it.
it
You
out
pick up
there.
the book, you get the book signed, right?
Yeah. Yes,
Pick
and
up A Rogue's
actually,
Tale.
yeah, and if you get the book, you can get it at Amazon. It's available now on Amazon, so just send away for it, or I'll have some with me at some of the Comic Cons.
Highly recommend it, Lenore. Thank you so much. Congratulations on coming back to the role. We're so happy about that.
Thanks
Congratulations on
for
the new
that.
live action series. Glad to see you in front of the camera. We always want to see that.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the book. It is
Cheers.
an unbelievable tale, and we're so glad that you shared that with everybody.
Thank you. Very
Thank
kind.
you.
Appreciate your words very much.
Thank you for joining me on Comic Book Central and continued success.
Thank you.